Got this notice in the mail today from Massachusetts State Pig Department. Department of State Police, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. They sent me this notice saying the grossly corrupt criminal politicians in Massachusetts have passed a law, or a statute really. It's not law until the people widely enough agree with it that it can be implemented. But I doubt that this has been submitted to a referendum process, and I'm sure that if it was, it would be tossed out. Based on the fact that a high percentage of people goes to jail in their lifetime, so they're not going to agree to submit their DNA, which is what this is about, to for like police harassment, that the cops picked them up on like trespassing in a public park charges and stuff like this, which is that's the reality of most of the harassment that's going on by the pigs, that they're harassing people wholly without cause. They're now under what's it called, a quota system, that they have to make so many arrests per month in order to be considered for promotion. And so, like, the more arrests you make, the higher likelihood it is that you'll be promoted. And so they're out there, banging the streets, kidnapping people on no charges at all, and then just making the charges up as they go along. Anyhow, they sent me this message, this little letter saying that they're threatening with this letter to kidnap me, to carry me 400 miles from my state to their state, so as to prosecute me for not submitting my DNA to them. I haven't contacted them as yet on this to find out what their justification of this is, but I have an idea that this is going to be related to 8 years ago, my having been, by duress, first refused my right to a jury trial, then I was put in prison, then I was told that the only way I was going to be let out of prison was to sign a paper saying that I pled guilty to the charges of assaulting the police officers. They told me that if I signed the paper, that I would be let out of jail immediately. They told me if I didn't sign the paper, I would go back to jail indefinitely. So that means that I would just be in jail for the rest of my life until I signed the paper. And that's what they told me, is the only option I had to get out of jail was to sign the paper. And so they had me under duress when they got this, what they're going to suppose is a conviction against me. But in actuality, it's an indictment of them. It's an indictment of their process. This was all based on a routine traffic stop that I was being given a speeding ticket when a pig decided to keep my license because I didn't allow him to abscond my license from me. He then took out his baton and began to beat me, wholly without my having assaulted him in any fashion, and then he decides to beat me with a baton. Ultimately, it wound up in the cops organizing a search party as I fled from the scene of where I was being beat with a baton, and they, about 30 of them found me on the side of the road. They're yelling at me, show us your hands and we'll fill you full of lead. I was in like a small wooded area at that point. And so I went to the top of a sprucey pine tree, and they unloaded 3 cans of pepper spray on me, and I stayed up the tree for about 20 minutes with the pepper spray, irritating my eyes and causing me to not be able to breathe very well. I got to a point where I felt like I was going to pass out, so I told them, all right, guys, I'm going to come down. And they're like, okay, one step at a time. I just held on to the top of the tree, and I let the tree bend to deliver me to the ground. And then I was standing there in front of them, and they tackled me to the ground. And then every one of them got a hit on me. Some of them were getting 2 and 3 hits: knees, elbows, punches, kicks. There was pigs surrounding me, all of them beating me while I was laying on the ground with my hands behind my back. They put me in cuffs. One of them yelled out, "Baton, Wedgie," and then shoved a baton into my ass crack. And the judge that refused to give me a jury trial, he refused to allow me to bring charges against these pigs. That I went to the clerk's office, and I demanded that I be given the paperwork to press charges against these pigs who brutally assaulted me. And instead of giving me the paperwork, they told me, the clerk told me that I had to go before the judge in order to get the paperwork. I went before the judge, and the judge told me if I insisted on pressing charges against the pigs that brutally assaulted me, that I would be arrested and I would go to jail immediately if I just insisted on pressing charges against them. I don't know, the state assigned attorney was absolutely no help to me. I had to fire a couple attorneys, and still they didn't give me anybody that understood my right to a jury trial. And I don't know, so it just dragged out and out like that for years and years, actually, that they didn't get a conviction on me on these charges, that they charged me with assaulting the pigs that assaulted me. And they didn't get me to sign the guilty plea until about a year later, that they picked me up on bogus charges, which all the charges eventually got just completely dismissed. But then they had me in jail, and they used that opportunity that they had me in jail to force me to sign a guilty plea. But it's not really a guilty plea because they got it under duress. They refused to give me my trial, which that's what I was demanding at that time, and they told me that I would be in jail indefinitely unless I just signed the guilty plea. So I don't know, that's what this is all about, that they want my DNA. They think they have some right to breach my privacy because on record, their bogus records that they keep, they supposedly have a conviction against me for assaulting the pigs that instead really assaulted me, that I didn't hit any of them. Anyhow, in this notice, they claim that I have refused to provide them my DNA. I'll read it to you exact. Records of the Massachusetts State Police CODIS Collective and Investigative Unit indicate that you are in violation of Massachusetts General Law 22E, Section 11, which states, any person required to provide a DNA sample pursuant to this chapter and who refuses to provide such DNA sample shall be subject to punishment by a fine of not more than $1,000 or imprisonment in a jail or house of corrections for not more than 6 months or both. So that's their threat to kidnap me and to travel me 400 miles away from my home. While I got 11 kittens here that need food daily, and I got a dog that needs food daily, they're saying that they're going to kidnap me and take me 400 miles away from my home. But I don't know. This is the part of it that makes this utterly bogus. Just from the this very brief initial interaction that they have issued here, is that they say a refusal to provide DNA. They're saying that I am in breach of 22E Section 11. I am in violation of Massachusetts general law. Being a citizen of Vermont, I'm in violation of Massachusetts general law for refusing to provide my DNA, but I've done no such thing. This is the first time that they have notified me that they want my DNA. There's been no refusal on my part. So even just their very initial communication to me is bogus. It's based on a lie. It's based on a lie that I have refused to give them my DNA, which I have not done. This is the first that they have notified me. How can I refuse to give them my DNA if they have not notified me that they want my DNA? So I'm going to contact them later on today, and I will, I'm definitely going to record that phone call, and I'm going to explain to them that, they're in violation of, whatever laws, trying to, harass me, which is really what they're doing. That's what they're doing with this, is they are harassing me. And this is related to my 10 years ago, that when this harassment began, when the pigs started assaulting me on a regular basis, that I was never guilty of any crime, that the pigs would show up to where I was and they would assault me, and then they would arrest me, then they would charge me with assaulting them. And this happened a couple times, that they charged me with assaulting them after they assaulted me. Anyhow, the last time that they did it, I actually beat the charges. I got the case dismissed, and so they even with the judge having refused to give me a jury trial, I still was eventually able to get the charges dismissed. But so this harassment from the Massachusetts state pigs, it has gone on for years and years, and it's all related to what it comes back to is I published against the Congress. I accused the Congress of mass murder. 500,000 Americans per year are dying due to tobacco-related disease. And I put that directly on the Congress for their subsidizing tobacco that's being knowingly grown in plutonium-laden fertilizer, which has been known since the 1960s. It was discovered by Dr. DeFranz, and that it was tobacco, or that it was the phosphate fertilizer that contains the radioactive nuclides, polonium and plutonium, that they're actually adding the radioactive material into the fertilizer. When I discovered that, I published against the Congress. I accused them of this 500,000 murders per year of Americans, and I don't know, then the harassment began. I started, every time I would go out in my car, I would get harassed by cops. It came to a point where I decided I didn't even want a car anymore because I got harassed in my car so many times. So I started using rollerblades as my daily transportation. That was that became my transportation, just so I could avoid the pigs harassing me. At that point, the point that I gave up my car and I gave up my license was when this whole pig situation happened, that they refused to, the judge refused to give me a jury trial. And the pigs brutally assaulted me, beat me with a baton, put a baton in my ass crack and yelled baton wedgie, and, that I wasn't allowed to sue them. And then, there's like, I don't know, there's years and years of like the Boston Police Department harassing me, the Boston Pigs. I read about them that this was in the Boston Globe some years back. Across 5 years, they 70, what was it, 70, I forget if it was 75 or 71. I think it was 71. 71 tested positive for drugs in their system. None of them were fired. 65 of those that tested positive for drugs tested positive for cocaine. Now, to test positive for cocaine is a rarity because cocaine is out of your system within 3 days. So if you can't pass a piss test, that you got so much cocaine in your system that you're pissing cocaine detectable, then most likely you are addicted to cocaine. You're not just a casual cocaine user. You are a daily abuser of cocaine. 65, which is a high percentage of the Boston Pigs, that for them to piss dirty piss tests, 65 haven't pissed cocaine. It speaks to their gross corruption. And then there was only one of them that got fired that was part of this group of cocaine addict pigs of the Boston Police Department. And that one who got fired, he got busted for running drugs between Florida and Massachusetts. And he was said to be throwing parties at which the principal invites were drug dealers, prostitutes, and uniformed police officers of the Boston Pig Department. So, like, the whole Boston Pig Department was all getting together for parties with drug dealers and prostitutes. And, then they're out there on a regular basis smashing me, throwing me into stuff, beating me down, putting me in chokeholds and whatnot, all over my doing absolutely nothing. I'll give you an example. One time, I was at a monument with some friends. One of the guys that was there with me was drinking a 40-ounce beer. He had put the beer down when he saw the police approach. That they drove up to the monument, which is in the middle of Commonwealth Avenue, but it's not on the street. So they drove off of the street up onto like a little park, in the middle of which is a monument. And I was not exactly where my friends were. I was just rolling my skateboard back and forth with nothing but the wheels touching the ground. So you know, I had done absolutely nothing. You know, the only thing that's criminal regarding skateboarding is if you like damage something. If you launch onto a monument and you drag your metal trucks across, you know, some type of stonework and you gouge it or something like that, yeah, that's a criminal act with a skateboard, that you are damaging public property. But I hadn't done any such thing. I was just rolling back and forth on my wheels. And so they came up and I don't know, they started talking to me, and they're like, hey, you come over here, sit down with these people. You know, sit down with these people, one of whom had been drinking a beer. And I don't know, so they call me over there. They start I don't know, they're like talking to me at length, and you know, they're asking whose beer it is, and I breathed far, you know, because the cop was standing kind of far away from me, so he could smell my breath, so he would know that I had not been drinking any beer. I was like, it wasn't me, and he's like, I don't know, he gets up in my face and he starts like, you know, yelling shit at me for having breathed my breath to where he could definitely smell. And then I don't know, he's like, you know, after a couple of seconds of screaming at me, I forget exactly what he was saying, but he was like, what do you think, you're a fucking tough guy, you know, what the fuck, and so, I don't know, he came up, he's like right in my face, yelling this stuff in my face, you know, probably hoping that I'm gonna get upset and like swing on him or something. You know, because this bogus conviction had already occurred, that you know, the state pigs think that they got me on police assault, when in actuality, you know, they really indicted themselves for assaulting me. They indicted several judges for refusing to give me a jury trial, and you know, you know, they're all just waiting on you know, the justice to occur, that they all be convicted and sentenced for all this gross criminality that they did on me. You know, as soon as you know, an actual legal regime presents itself, that I can carry a you know, that I can carry the accusation to, you know, that might warrant a, or you know, that might you know, actually seek a proper investigation. Anyhow, this cop, after he's screaming at me in my face, he puts his hand on my chest and he throws me down onto a bench. And I was like, that's assault, man. You know, why the hell are you assaulting me now? I was like, you know, I stayed sitting on the bench that he threw me onto. You know, and then, you know, at that point, I was like, okay, I'm going to recite to these guys, you know, my poetry. So I started reciting to them, the Bush family fortune came from the Third Reich. I feel this deserves until the present government is replaced strike. The Bush-Nazi connection, according to John Loftus, former U.S. Justice Department Nazi war crimes investigator. You know, the poem goes on, and it describes the gross criminality of the federal government that these Boston pigs are accepting money from to do their criminal shakedown operation, that they're all doing drugs. You know, they're all ridiculously hopped up on steroids. You know, they're doing crack cocaine. You know, and none of them, of all these cops that pissed dirty, none of them was fired and none of them was convicted. So it's like, if they piss dirty, then they just got some dirt on these guys, like, ah ha ha, you're a dirty drug dealer, or you know, you're a dirty drug user, so you know, now you got to do whatever criminality we tell you to do, you know. And then so that's what they're doing, is they're out there doing gross criminality on a daily basis, the pigs in Massachusetts and especially in Boston. Anyhow, yeah, so they say in this. They say in this, oh yeah, so then the cops in that situation, because I started reciting my poetry to them, expressing to them how grossly corrupt their criminal regime is, you know, they then arrested me. Eventually all the charges got thrown out, you know, because it's all bogus. They didn't actually charge me with assaulting them, but they charged me with, what was it? They said like trespassing, disorderly conduct, or some bunch of bullshit like that. And I don't know. So you know, those charges got thrown out. You know, the only the only convictions that the police got on me was by duress. And more than half of the times that they arrested me as harassment, I fully beat the charges. That the charges were just completely dismissed. And I don't know. So to be receiving this, for my long sentence, and like the last time they got a conviction on me was like 2003, so it was more than 8 years ago. And now they're saying that they have some right to violate my privacy while I live in Newport, Vermont, that they get to collect a DNA sample from me because they harassed me all these years ago. That they scored bogus convictions on me by duress and by criminal malfeasance, by violation of my rights to a jury trial. They were able to wrangle me by duress into signing guilty pleas. Totally ridiculous. But so I don't know. This is the latest piggery that I'm dealing with here. Is that the Massachusetts State Pigs? They claim that they have a right to kidnap me and to travel me across state lines, to bring me 400 miles from where I have animals to take care of, and to then to imprison me for 6 months against my will. And probably without without any type of valid legal representation, because the lawyers. My God, I was trying to just settle a lawsuit last year that I got hit and run, double hit and run. That these people, they hit me one time, they hit me with their car, and then like I had I don't know, I was standing there, the guy, he gets out of his car, and he walks around the car to see where my bike is in relation to his car. Then he backs over my bike tire, he gets back in his car, he backs over my bike tire, and then he runs over my bike tire on his way forward again and drives off. So he hit my bike after he hit me, just to make sure that I wasn't going to be able to follow him in Boston traffic on my bike. That I was going to eventually be able to catch up to him and prevent him from just driving away from this accident. It was actually a passenger in his car that hit me with the door of his car, and the passenger had gotten out of the car and seemed like he was going to be waiting on the police to arrive. But then after the driver drove off, then the passenger ran off. And so I had to chase the passenger down with a broken collarbone that I found him about, almost... I'm going to say it was at least half a mile. Maybe it was almost a mile away. That I had to chase him down into a T station, into the subway, before, then I caught him in the subway. And, then the police showed up to that situation, and they were screaming in my face. I don't know, the first thing I told them, I was like, hey man, I just got hit by a car. I was like, you guys got no reason to be screaming at me. I was like, that's the guy right there, that's the guy that hit me. I have not hit him, I have not done anything to him, and, he hit me with a car, so, if you guys are gonna be yelling at somebody, that's the guy right there. And, they're still yelling in my face, trying to get me to hit them, because, the pigs think that, I have, like, a problem with authority. I don't have a problem with authority, if the authority is valid, but, this gross criminality that's claiming to be an authority, there's no way in hell that you are going to get me to go along with this ridiculously gross criminality. This violation of my rights, this violation of privacy rights, this violation of all this, constitutional rights, all of this bullshit is nothing but harassment. If you're going to harass decent people, which I am, then, to express my decency, I've saved 2 people's lives. One guy, he was in a coma for a week, that if I hadn't called to get an ambulance to where he was gonna die. And there was another girl who, there was a guy with a 1.75 liter bottle top that was a nice handle, and it had like a jagged, a sharp piece of glass that was coming off the top of it, and he was handling this in his pocket, and he was having an argument with this woman who was about his size. So presumably him with this weapon, him having this argument with this woman, that it was going to go to the next level, and he was going to wind up trying to stab her with this. They're both crackheads also, but I don't know. When I saw what was going on there, I immediately jumped on him. I pulled him to the ground. I took the bottle top out of his pocket to see what he was holding on to because I figured it was probably a knife or something. And when I seen it, I punched him in his ass a bunch of times until he wasn't feeling so hot to trot. And then I went about my business. I literally in his ass, that like his ass and his hind quarter. That's where I hit him just to to weaken him so that he wasn't going to get up and try to scrap with me. But I don't know. So she later on, this woman, she stated to me directly that I had saved her life by having taken that weapon from him when he had started this argument with her over her not smoking her crack with him. And there's like bunches of other incidents across my lifetime where I got involved, that people were threatening other people with knives, that I fought the people who had the knife. There were guys who used to show up to this park that I would hang out in Boston, who were ripping off the high school kids that hung out in that park. And I would when I found out that these guys were holding up these high school kids at knife point, I started a fight with one of these guys who was doing this knife point robbery. Later on, and he's a guy who's way bigger than me. I was about 150 pounds in those days, and he's maybe 280, almost 300 pounds or so. 6'3", 3 inches taller than me, or something like that. And I started a fight with that guy. I walked up to him, I punched him right in the sternum, and I told him, do not hold up these kids at knife point anymore. I was like, if I hear about that shit going on in this park, it's going to be on between me and you. And I never heard of that guy holding up anybody in the park again. He was later, he went to jail, and he was featured on some show on MTV about being a model prisoner in jail or something. I forget what the whole story with that was, but I don't know. Then there was one of his friends showed up to the park with a knife, and I rolled into the park on my rollerblades one day, and I had sat down and I started to swap my rollerblades out, and he walked up to me and he flicked his knife out, and he started having a conversation with me about what had happened between me and this other guy who was holding up the kids at knife point. And I was just like, oh no, I ain't got a problem with that guy. I already discussed with him, what the situation was between us, and he told me, he didn't have any problem with me, which that was a real situation. That's what happened between me and him was, after I told him, to cut the shit out, not be holding kids up at knife point in the park that I used to hang out in, then he basically expressed to me that he was all done with the situation, that he wasn't gonna mess with me anymore. But so his friend comes into the park and he's got his knife out, and I'm swapping out of my rollerblades into my sneakers. And I don't know, after I got my sneakers on, then I put my rollerblades on my hand in a style of boxing that I now call crab style boxing. That like I was throwing huge haymakers at him, and when he would move back, then I would parry to a new position or whatnot. And I was like, I gained height advantage on him. Like I straddled a pair of benches that were back to back, and I was like throwing punches like down at his face and whatnot, and making him back up from me. And nobody scored any hits. Like he wasn't able to put his knife on me, and I wasn't able to hit him with my rollerblade. But I started to get the feeling like he wasn't totally proficient with his knife. Like he hadn't really ever studied knife fighting, because like I think if I had the knife, I definitely would have put the knife on me by that point. And so I said to him, I was like, you didn't study knife fighting or anything, huh? And he's like, no. And I threw one of my rollerblades down, and I was like, oh, then I should throw one of these down because you're about to get stuck. And I was just saying this to him, meaning that, like, I'm going to grab the knife from him, the next time he comes at me, I'm going to stick him with his own knife. And, so then he's like, then he stopped fighting me. He was like, he had seen that, it had been like 5 minutes that he was trying to put a knife on me, that I had rejected his knife play. I don't know if anybody had called the cops. Cops never showed up. We're right there in the middle of Copley Square in daylight, that he's trying to assault me with a knife. and I'm fighting back against them with my rollerblades, and nobody calls the cops. That, like, in Copley Square during the day, there's like the Hancock Building. People are just walking through Copley Square, going to lunch and whatnot. There's always somebody walking through that park during the day. There's no 5 minutes that there's not somebody new in the park. And nobody ever called the pigs, but a bunch of times that people tried to stab me, and it's all over this situation that, people were trying to be ridiculous criminals, that they were trying to do violence on people around me, and that I would then fight them. And in all of those situations that I would then call the pigs would show up, the guys that tried to stab me would get away, and there would never be any investigation of what it was so it became very obvious to me that the Boston Pigs were in cahoots with the criminals that were trying to kill me with knives on a regular basis. Anyhow, so then, here they are trying to violate my privacy, that they're saying that they're going to kidnap me, if I don't submit to them my DNA. So I'm going to call them, I'm going to tell them, like, there's enough of my DNA around, if you want to get some information on my DNA, 11 lines, 11 different families that arrived on the Mayflower, the Pilgrims, so the first white settlers of the United States. 11 different families of the Pilgrims I am related to, that they all are, all of 11 different families, they married and they bred, and I am the result of all of those pilgrim marriages. So there's plenty of there's plenty of my DNA, about Massachusetts, that very many presidents and very many high-level politicians have been related to the Pilgrims, that they their ancestry descends to the very first colony, the very first white colony in the New World, North America. And for me to be related to the Pilgrims means that my DNA is massively, the DNA that I share, with my family is massively proliferated across the whole of the United States, and very densely in Massachusetts. But I submitted my DNA to a testing agency on my father's DNA, because that's the Pilgrim side is my mother's DNA. But my father, I submitted to him, or not to him, but to a testing agency, my Y DNA, which is my father's, or my DNA on my father's side. And they determined that I was the most common type of European, that the most people of Europe, the most common genetic ancestry in Europe is the type of DNA that is in my blood and in my body. And so I don't know, there's like for them to if they really want my DNA so bad, I'm sure that they can find it, and for it to be for them to threaten me with kidnapping over, these bogus charges in this criminal justice system that they're conducting, the Just Us system, with the pigs being all doped up on drugs and, grossly criminally corrupt, doing kidnappings on a regular basis and trying to, force people to sign guilty pleas by holding them in jail and insisting that they don't have a right to a jury trial, and that, they... is this huge, ridiculously, grossly criminal organization that is the Massachusetts state government, that is the U.S. federal government, that is the world government. It's all it's all gross cronyism. That it is a crime. It is a crime. And who's now the governor? Deval L. Patrick, sending me this this threat You know, that's who's threatening me with kidnapping. You know, threatening to kidnap me and to travel me across state lines, 400 miles, to where, you know, of course they're going to torture me with, you know, bad prison food and you know, without cause, robbing my freedom. You know, that's like that's the bulk of the crime that they have. You know, even, well, I don't know. I guess like probably the assault that they've done has been, you know, the times that they have assaulted me have been, you know, a greater criminality than the amount of time that they have robbed from me, that they stole my freedom. Because I don't know, for all this harassment that I suffered, I want to say it was only like 2 months that they wound up keeping me in jail. Yeah, for all of this, for all of these times, and they picked me up like 7 times. They harassed me and put me in jail, and most of the time I was just out of jail the next day, charges dismissed, and you know, because it was all bogus charges. But you know, for the times that that they kept me in jail longer than that. I don't know, some of those times even the charges were just dismissed outright. But you know, they yeah, they didn't really get so much time from me as far as, like, you know, stealing my freedom from me. But you know, it's an infraction to thieve somebody's freedom when the person is guilty of no injury against somebody else. And that's what's required by law, to, you know, by valid law, you know, not this ridiculous statute that these, you know, criminally monstrous governors, you know, these statutes that they write claiming that they have the right to, you know, thieve people's freedom for, you know, whatever, not submitting their DNA. You know, where's the injury? Who's complaining that I injured them? Why would you have the right to steal my freedom from me? You know, and that's what it comes down to, is if nobody is saying that you injured them, these pigs, they have no right to steal your freedom from you.